Okay, we enter part two of looking at the history of boats, boating, actually just watercraft uh, in the world, and looking at a lot of the original reed boats that had started out from the most primitive forms all the way back up. But you can see that this indeed is not a primitive form in any way, and this is in rock art 6,000 years ago, pre-dynastic Egypt. I'll show you at the very end of this videos that I have of its connections to Sumerian reed boats, which predate it and look a lot like that you see there here and on this, which is in Azerbaijan up in the Caspian Sea, that show the same thing, and a huge amount of people that are acquainted to being with this. But there even goes back to 16,000 BC in reed boats in Lake Titicaca, showing you the same type of thing in reed boats, and that match the Sumerian style and the way that they're doing things, and it's pretty much around the world through that. And dugout canoes that we've been looking at, and we were starting to look at the end of the last one, and how you're just digging out a canoe, and you can even burn the middle part of it and then scrape that out and then burn it again and scrape that out and burn it. And this is the way that indigenous were making canoes in Virginia in 1585. It shows here conspicuously the people look very Caucasian though, or something, I don't know. But outriggers is just something where it has a rigging hooked up to it that floats out beside it, and it keeps her from wanting to tip over that way. And because of its weight, it makes it do want to lean that way. And so you have that catamaran effect that everybody's familiar with. And dugouts along the Amazon that people had created from long ago. Haida canoe, giant canoes and boats and stuff, which look very much like European longboats here in Canada. Fiji outriggers and stuff, and then a sail put onto them, and the sail in that triangle, or what they call a lamphod form, that you'll see, especially a lot of early Asian type of boatings and stuff, where they have a triangulated scale instead of a square sail. But you see that in all forms, but people are using square sails a lot too. So let's look at the idea of coracles and kayaks. Kayaks are little sealed up, arcs, if you will, and then coracles are bitumen covered baskets, like you can see the story of Moses of letting loose into a sealed basket that couldn't be got, and then it was sealed with bitumen and so on. It follows the same idea. Uh, this is made for lighter boats, and smaller ones, even portable even. Uh, there is circumstantial evidence that such boats were used as early as 9500 BC before the Pesce canoe, but required technologies more advanced, and probable that wood canoes came first. Yet he just showed you a minute ago that wood canoes only date back to around 8000 BC, and then reed art that dates before that, and I tell you it goes back to 16,000 BC in a place that's a little bit controversial. For before they found the boat, they dated the site, and then in the site they found boat, and they went, okay, and they tried to say that they were different dates, and of course they were the same dating system and the same usage and the same patina on the rocks and stuff. And so it seems to date as early as 16,000 BC, they say now, and people try to fudge now and say, oh, it's only 12,000. It's only at the end of the last ice age and coming out of it. But regardless of that, it by the people that are the fact that the hominids that we find on the islands that are not being able to be connected, and must have been some type of boating system that got them there way before the last ice age, that shows to be an incorrect true. Coracles use whisker baskets for the frame. European coracles, man, this is here. It's going to show you some Proto-European things here. Here from the idea of a Sumerian coracle, and at the very end I'll show you one, but that Irving Finkel redid, and I'll show you a little bit of that in some other videos that I have attached to it that you may want to look up. But it'll show you something very similar from India all the way up till near China and Azerbaijan, but yeah, it can go farther up than that, and farther east and northeast than that, and way, way north, and then go east, 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 and end up into the Americas. Or it can go all the way west of that and end up all the way in Britain and so on, and all the way through the Middle East and Asia. It's a waterproofing achieved with cloth and pitch. For example, in the Bible, Moses is sent off in a small basket and bulrushes coated with pitch. And so this is the exact same thing. And here we see the Indian coracle that's there. The Sumerian one I talked about really is almost an exact replica of this one, and it's known as an Irish curragh. Curragh, coracle. The name and the linguistics even connect each other. And I've shown you in other videos how linguistics and Proto-Indo-European languages attach all the way from India through to the Irish people themselves. In North America, Indians developed the birch bark canoe, a frame of wooden ribs covered with sewn patches of bark. Birch bark was the perfect choice. Not only was it lightweight and smooth, but it's also waterproof and resilient. The joints of the canoes were bound together by the root of the white pine and then made waterproof by applying hot pine or resin, spruce resin. So basically sap, like maple syrup, but not from the maple tree, right? And the kayak traditionally built by stretching over seal skins over a frame of light driftwood or whale bones and then coating it with whale fat, and then that was more resistant, right? And fat's very resistant to water, oil and water type thing. They were developed by the indigenous Aleutian and Inuit in the subarctic regions of the world, and there's your Eskimoid types in your bottom right hand corner, and just slightly different. And these are a different people than these people are. And in one of my just recent videos, I show you that these people have European stock as well as the Asiatic stock that ends up being a portion of what these people are, but not exactly what they are. This is not what was the Amerindians. Typically, the kayaks covered included a spray skirt to insulate the rider from the cold and prevent being swamped by the waves. The northern peoples also built umiaks, which are larger open sealskin boats used to move more people and possessions in seasonal hunting grounds. And I don't know if you've seen those, but those are huge. And this is kind of a small kayak. They can be a little bigger and all the way sealed in. There's a lot of different variation. European leather boats. The arguments for prehistoric European leather boats comes from the discovery in northern Germany of reindeer bones dated around 9500 BC, which show arrow wounds from behind the neck and shoulders. This is indicative of hunting techniques still used up until recently by Inuits in North America, as shown by the hunters ambush migrating herds from boats as they swim across the lakes and rivers, so they would get people to run them into the water with boating people there, and the boating people would come up and stab them and, get them at least hurt, and then you would be able to take them. As shown by the hunters ambushing those uh, in the picture below, the lack of trees in northern Europe at that time precludes the use of dugout canoes, hence the assumption that reindeer hide boats were used. So there's an idea they could have been, and there's even been a few sites that show where they have some sticks put together and everything, and they find blah 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 and everything. Of course, no human remains or so on with it, and they go, this could have been some type of boat, but it's not only collapsed, but it's just disintegrated away, and is never taken seriously. But it should be maybe looked at a little more seriously. Historic sea crossings, recreation. In 1947, the Norwegian ethnographer Thor Heyerdahl started a trend by sailing the Kon-Tiki, a balsa log raft from South America to the Tuamotu Islands out in the Pacific. The expedition was designed to demonstrate that the ancient people had made long sea voyages, creating context between separate cultures. Since that time, many other expeditions had attempted ocean crossings using primitive techniques. In 1947, the established theory holds that Polynesia was colonized via Asia some 5,500 years ago, based on similarities with statues on Easter Island and others in Bolivia, and Heyerdahl believed that there had been contact from South America. To support this claim, he sailed from Peru with 5 other adventurers on a raft built in native style from balsa wood, bamboo, and hemp. And after 101 days and 4,300 nautical miles on the open sea, they arrived in the Tuamotu Islands. And hopefully you can see it in the picture here. They were also told, the Spaniards were told, that they knew of Easter Island and exactly what direction it was in a vector run off through there. And so another correlation that they even knew of it. In 1970, Heyerdahl was at it again, proving again the reed boat of Egyptian design, and they say that instead of Sumerian, but that's a Sumerian reed boat. Design could reach South America. Could Aztec pyramids have been influenced by the Egyptians? And of course, the answer to that is yeah, the both cultures, definitely by a common culture. Yeah, and there's a lot of folklore and things that are just too conspicuous to leave it alone, much less the idea that they thought that whenever Pizarro showed up that he was Quetzalcoatl coming back and stuff. And so so what he did here was he left out the pillars of Hercules here, like they say where Atlantis used to be, and then there were some islands and then a great island before, but they did kind of like what Columbus would have done, but swung it farther. And they went down and off the tip of Africa here and ran across and ran right into the islands of Barbados. And here's where they left from the balsa logs left in Ecuador and went around. And the currents here seem to pinch you and put you into there. You don't want to get caught up in here. It's a doldrums and stuff. But he went 3,270 miles in only 57 days. So 2 months, basically, and he was here. Just had to have provisions and so on. And of course, you can fish along the way, but you don't want to live off just fish. You'll get scurvy, things like that. I don't know any problems like that, but this expedition sought to replicate a much later exploit, St. Brendan's 483 to 553 7-year voyage across the Atlantic in a leather boat to a new land, and his return that was projected. St. Brendan was supposed to have come across to the North American here, and he had left out of Ireland, supposedly went to the Faroe Islands, Iceland, Greenland, across in the Labrador Sea. There's nothing saying that he didn't come up here and shoot all the way across, shoot across to here. There's, hey, you really, if you knew about it, you could just go there and here. In fact, if you really just knew about it then you could go here. It was a 36-foot, two-masted boat, was built in tradition fashion of Irish ash and oak, so the sacred woods of there, if you've seen my videos about trees, hand lashed together with nearly 2 miles of leather thong and hemp, wrapped with 49 tanned ox hides and sealed with wool grease between. And what would the sails be made out of too? Nearly 1976 and June 1977, Tim Severin and his crew sailed the Brendan 4,500 miles or 72 kilometers from Ireland to Peckford Island in Newfoundland, stopping at the Hebrides and Iceland en route. And there's the route that was made. So, and of course we know about Leif Erikson and so on else, but of course it seems like the Solutreans had come much before that, and then of course doing the same thing when the people came across in Alaska, and it seems they would have had boats already at that point too. So boats came very much predating civilization. Something, reed boats simple as this, or a dugout as simple as this. Recent digs have shown that most islands in the Mediterranean were visited or settled by Stone Age people. And this is way before the classic civilizations of Egypt or Mesopotamia and Greece. They never mentioned Sumeria. On Cyprus, agricultural settlements dated to 9,000 BC were found, and the first settlements on Crete at 7,000 BC They precede the Minoan civilizations by more than 4 millennia, and there are people that are doing that, and they had to have come from a mainland and so on. And a genetic study that I showed you at least there was a group of those people that were Proto-Indo-European farmers. Yeah, and they had gone to the islands, and that ended up being what makes the Grecians too. So that just makes sense. But island settlement implies some navigation. Legs over 100 kilometers in very primitive craft. There are also evidence of repeated trade in obsidian between some islands and the mainland, and in recent years, experimental archaeologists have repeated these voyages in both reed craft and dugout canoes. I've got a video that shows that someone in Denmark, high official, was buried in ancient times, and he has Egyptian beadwork, and they have traced it to directly the same type of beadwork that is done in King Tut's chess piece, and that whole grouping of people that used and did that with. So that predates what we thought of happening with their trade too. But I've showed also too there was a trade long ago before the silk trade. There was a trade running up all the way into what is known as China today, and so it goes far beyond what people want to believe in or want to talk about. The first Mariner projects showed how Homo erectus could have reached Flores in the Indonesian archipelago. God, I can't talk. 800,000 years ago. Get a drink. They also demonstrated how the Aborigines could have sailed 600 kilometers from Timor to Australia around 50,000 years ago. And so how you can get that. And they talk about human migrations here, and you can see these phases they go with phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and how people had come up out of Africa. And this is highly debated, but one thing that's not highly debated is the fact that, about 100,000 years ago, the the time frame of the oldest that we find on the map here is off in that exact Sumerian area and Proto-European area that we look at, branching in, and then with the ice shelves over here, kept encroaching in between each um, ice age, and so that staved off anything of Northern European, and so Russia and so on. But yet there was contact with the Americas that people are saying in some maps 15, 12,000 years ago, when 4,500 years ago. So that would have been 2500 BC that we had already come across here. Solutrean contract shows 28,000 years or so, 22, 20, 28, coming across in this direction. And now we're also finding skeletons that are up here where it says 15,000 that are a little older than that are 18,000 years, and the other site respectively is like 21, I think, off the top of my head, and those are both showing a European form. So kind of neat.